So we're going to continue on this topic of living in his presence. And I'd like to encourage you, hopefully everybody picked up a copy of the bulletin. And well, the first two, if you want to fill in the first two big points, but there's going to be a third point where it talks about your choices. And I'm going to encourage you to not only fill in the blanks, but this is kind of like one of those multiple choice tests. I'd like you to circle the one that you think applies to where your life is today, on this day. But we're not going to start out talking about this day. We're actually going to be talking about on that day. Now, when I say that word, that day, we are going to be diving into the book of Revelation today. Specifically, if you want to go ahead, I'm going to be in Revelation chapter 20, which is page 1229 in the Bible that's in the pew rack, or you can turn to Revelation chapter 20 in your own Bible, whichever way you wish to do this. I am going to encourage you to follow along. And we're going to be talking about that day. And you're probably thinking, wait a minute, Revelation chapter 20, you skipped 20 chapters. Well, yes. Yes, I did. But if you want to go back and read those chapters, that's kind of cool. And there's some great images there. They don't really pertain really well to a sermon because it would take more than 25, 30 minutes to go through most of those images. But here's what you need to know about the preceding chapters before we get to that day. The book is all about the number 7. The number 7 because there are 7 seals that get broken, and there are 7 trumpets that get blown, and there are 7 bowls that get poured out. And that number 7 is important because the number 7 in the Bible is usually God's number of completion. So in the first 19 chapters of Revelation, is you're kind of watching the cleansing of the physical earth, and you're watching God outpour judgment as he begins to deal with humanity's sin, and he begins to take the earth and begin to prepare it for that day. And again, the imagery is sometimes very confusing, and a lot of people have made up different timelines, and there are other theories about what all the images mean. And so that's another lesson, but it's not something that we would do in a sermon. It would be something we would have to do more in a study because there's just a lot there. But you need to understand, we're watching God's plan unfold, and behind it all, God's in control. And when all of the seals are broken, and all of the trumpets stop blowing, and all of the bowls are poured out, we arrive at that day. That very, very important day. And it's a day that Jesus described in Luke chapter 13, verses 24 through 30. I know I sent you to Revelation. I'll join you there in just a few minutes. Luke chapter 13, verse 24 through 30. This is how Jesus describes that day. Make every effort to enter through the narrow door, because many, I tell you, will try to enter and will not be able to. Once the owner of the house gets up and closes the door, you will stand outside knocking and pleading, "Sir, open the door for us." But he will answer, "I do not know you or where you come from." Then you will say, "We ate and drank with you and taught in your streets." But he will reply, I don't know you or where you come from. Away with you, all you evil doers. There will be weeping there and gnashing of teeth when you see Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and the prophets in the kingdom of God, but you yourselves thrown out. People will come from east and west and north and south, and will take up their places at the feast of the kingdom of God. Indeed, there are those who are last will be first, and those who are first will be last. And as I read Jesus' description of that day, the words that just jump off the page are the emotions that are going on, because that day is going to be a very emotional day in history. He talks about the idea of pleading, which we get the idea that people are now begging with Jesus to reconsider what's going on in their life. They're putting their case out there. They are making their motions. They are pleading to change the outcome. He talks about weeping. We understand weeping. Weeping is usually paired with the idea of sorrow. They realize that day has come. That door is locked. And they begin to look back on their life and see the choices that they had made. And on that day, they realized they had opportunities to walk through the door, and they never chose to do so. And the realization begins to sit in. The one that just really jumps at me is the idea of gnashing of teeth. And I don't know if you understand that, but it's kind of like this pose. You know, they just grind their teeth together, and they're furious. And it's almost like the idea that they feel like they got deceived. They felt like they were entitled to go through that door. They felt like they had done everything they were supposed to do to walk through that door. And here's Jesus saying, I don't even know who you are. You're not coming through the door. And they're gritting their teeth almost in denial that they could be lost on the outside of the door looking in. And it's just an emotional day. You see, it's a day that we like to put a term on it. We call it Judgment Day. But really, whoops, wrong button. There we go. Really, it's a day that's called the Day of the Lord. And Paul writes about this day in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5:2. It's a day that God is physically back on the scene, and God is going to put right what's been wrong so very long. I mean, he's going to sort it all out, and what's black is going to be black, and what's white is going to be white. There aren't going to be any gray areas in the middle. It's an on or off, an in and out. It's a switch that goes there, and he just wants you to know this is God's day. And, you know, I think about God's day, and how could God's day be steeped with such negative emotion? I would think God's day would be a day that words we would use would be like praise. Words that we would use would be rejoicing. Words that we would use would be celebration, because it's God's day. It's the day that we've waited for so long. And you know, that kind of figures how you got here. You see, Paul wasn't the first person to use this phrase, the day of the Lord. Malachi used it in Malachi chapter 4, verse 5. And he added some adjectives to the front of the day of the Lord. He called it great and dreadful. He said it is a day that's going to be a great day, but it's a day that you should dread. And now, I understand the idea of dread, because I used to go to school, and you know, you had summer vacation, and then you start long about mid-July, and this is back when school started the day after Labor Day. Long about July, you realize the days are slipping away, and then you get into August, and you start thinking, and what are you dreading? First day of school. Summer is over, playtime is done, I've got my responsibilities, I got things I got to do, and I began dreading, going, well, this is going to be worse than that. Malachi said this is a day that many people are going to look forward to, and it says they're going to dread that day. Of course, in Acts chapter 2, verse 20, the writer there also uses a term to go with that day. He called it great and glorious. He said this is going to be a glorious day. This is the day when we're going to get to see Jesus. This is the day when we're going to see all of our loved ones. This is the day that we're going to have all of these things that we can look forward to. And so we have these opposing sides of what this day is all about. And again, it's all about how you got here. You see, what decides whether that day is dreadful or that day is great, glorious, has nothing to do with that day. But it has everything to do with how you yourself got there. You see, because on that day, your choices will decide your forever. Now, you think about it, how many choices do you make in a day? I mean, I got up this morning and I've already made several choices. I chose what to wear. I chose what I was going to drive to get here. I chose what path I was going to take to get here. But you understand, all of those choices can be undone. I mean, tomorrow's a new day, and I can choose a different path, right? I can choose something else to wear. But on that day, the choices are forever. So the choices are important. So I want you to understand what that day is all about. And so now we're going to be in Revelation chapter 20, verses 11 through 15. And this is how the writer John describes that day. And remember, he's been taken up to heaven. He's been given a series of visions. And this is another new vision that he starts. And it says, Then I saw a great and white throne, and him who was seated on it. Earth and the sky fled from his presence, and there was no place for them. And I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne. The books were opened. Another book was opened, which was the book of life. The dead were judged according to what they had done, as recorded in the books. The sea gave up the dead that were in it, and death and Hades gave up the dead that were in them, and each person was judged according to what they had done. Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire, and the lake of fire is the second death. If anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, was thrown into the lake of fire. And you know what? We read that, and you're probably thinking, you're already scaring me. I don't think I like this sermon. Well, understand, you need to hear that because you need to be prepared for that day. We need to understand that there are some things going on, and as this scene begins to open up, it would make Hollywood jealous. Because we see a throne that comes into being and comes into place, and on it is a guy with the white hair, and he's all glowing, and it looks very much like the picture you see of Jesus in the first part of Revelation. Daniel talks about it and identifies who this person is. As he says in Daniel chapter 7, verse 9, it says, The Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was as white as snow, and the hair on his head white like wool. His throne was flaming with fire, and the wheels were all ablaze. And you get the idea that this is a serious moment in people's lives. I mean, we're talking about forever right now. We're talking about eternity. We're talking about the moment when God himself is there, and you are now standing before the throne. I never got called much to the principal's office because I knew my life depended on me not being in the principal's office. Most of the offices I got called to, I seemed to spend a lot of time in the minister's office and the youth minister's office. And I don't know why. They were just picking on me. That's what it was. But it was always those moments when you're told to go to the office and you just know nothing ever good comes from those words, are they? When you're told to go and sit and wait, you know that it's not going to be bad because they don't usually call the good people to the office. They call everybody, they call only the bad. Well, you understand this moment, everybody's called to the throne. Everybody is here, standing before this throne, and that leads us to the first choice you have to make. Who's on the throne? Now, you're probably thinking, well, God, Jesus, duh. This is church. We know the answer to this. And you know what? You're absolutely right. That's who's on the throne. But that's a given at this point. Because Romans chapter 14, verses 11 and 12 says, We will all stand before God's judgment seat. It is written, As surely as I live, says the Lord, every knee will bow before me, and every tongue will confess to God, so that each of us will give account according to himself to God. So yes, this is God's throne. But when I ask you that question about who's on the throne, I don't want to know the name of the being. I want to know your relationship with the being. Is he your judge or is he your king? Now think about that. Both of these figures are authority figures. Both of these figures are there to rule over. They are there to pass judgment. They are there to offer command. They are characters of authority. But I want you to notice the difference. The judge simply looks at the evidence. The judge simply looks at the facts that have been laid before him, and they make the decision only on the facts. The king is a little different. The king is somebody that has some kind of a relationship with the person standing before the throne. You don't get to come before the throne as a stranger to a king. And the king also has to make decisions based on judgment, but he can go off of that relationship and what he knows about the person, and he can think about their character and all of these other things. So the king has more latitude in what he's got there and standing before him. And so this question is very important because who's on that throne for you? When you're standing before that throne, let's just say today was that day. And you're standing there right now, and there's the throne, there's the guy with the big white beard, and he's all aglow, and there's flaming all around him, and you're looking up at him. Who is he to you? Is he there to judge your life? Or is he the person that's been ruling over your life? That's an important distinction on that day. It's an important distinction on that particular day because it leads us directly into the next question. Which standard are you going to be judged by? Verse 12 of Revelation 20 says, "And I saw the deeds great and small standing before the dead, great and small standing before the throne, and the books were opened. And another book was opened, and the book of life, and the dead were judged according to what they had done, as recorded in the books." Now, when I asked you which standard you're going to be judged by, maybe you're thinking, cool, I get to choose? And to quote great old philosopher Phineas and Ferb, yes, you do. You 100% absolutely get to choose how you're going to be judged. Because I do want you to see there are two sets of books. There are the book of deeds, and there is the book of life. And the thing is, the question is which one you want to choose. Now, you can, if you like, choose the book of deeds. Now, the book of deeds is exactly what it says. It's kind of like a dictionary or a diary of all the things. It's kind of like the chronicle of your life. Now, you do understand what those books mean. It means that at some point, everybody's going to see the book. It says that the books were open. And you know what an open book means, right? It means that everybody is free to come and thumb the pages and see your life as you lived it. Right there on that day. And you can, if you like, you can choose to say, you know what? That's how I want to be judged. I want you to take all the good things and all the bad things, and I want God, you just be the judge, and you tell me whether I'm good enough. Of course, we know the problem with that, right? We know Romans chapter 3, verse 23 says, "For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God." We understand that when we begin to look at those books and we begin to understand those particular things, we understand that it's not going to end well if I just go by my deeds. Because who's going to set the standard? Who says how many good things I have to do for each bad thing? Who decides that, you know what, if I tell this lie, this is what I have to do to make up for that lie? What is it I'm going to offer back that's going to pay for that? What is it? Who sets the weights? Well, that's the judge. And if you're standing there in front of the judge, he's already told you the way it works. The second you have one sin, then the scales can never be rebalanced. And so you're standing there on that day, asked to be judged by your deeds. Am I good enough? And let me go ahead and give you the answer. You're not. Now, that isn't me judging you, because guess what? I'm not. There hasn't been a person to walk on this planet other than Jesus himself that could stand in front of that throne and say, "Judge me on my deeds," and expect that God's going to find favor with them. But the good news is there was one. His name was Jesus. And if we take Romans chapter 20, verse 3:23, and we put it back in context, and we wrap 22 and 24 around it, this is how it really reads. "The righteousness from God comes through faith in Jesus Christ to all who believe. There is no difference, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, and are justified freely by his grace through the redemption that came by Jesus Christ." See, the Bible mentions two sets of books, did it not, in Revelation? It had the book of deeds, but then it had the Lamb's book of life. And that book is quite different, because my name doesn't get there because of something I did. It doesn't get there because I lived a good life. It doesn't get there because I'm a nice person. It doesn't get there because my grandmother came here. It doesn't get there because of my last name. My name gets in that book for one reason and one reason only. I belong to the Lamb. Hence the reason it's called the Lamb's Book of Life. And I've followed Jesus as my personal Lord and Savior. And now I stand before that throne, not in my good deeds. But folks, I'm standing behind the Lamb. I'm standing behind the sacrifice that Jesus made. I'm standing behind every single thing that Jesus had promised me. I am going to put everything I've got rested on those promises. And on that day, I am just going to throw myself on the mercy of the court, and I am going to ask God, give me grace, because I know the deeds, they don't get me there. But check the second book. Because Jesus came and gave his life for each and every one of us. And I accept that as my destination, and I accept that as what I'm going to follow. That is my faith, and that's where I'm going to put my faith. And you know what? That's how I plan on getting to that day. I'm coming to that day not because I'm going to be some awesome person that's going to impress God. I'm coming to that day because, you know what? Jesus already put it there for me. And that leads to a very important question. What's your final destination? Now, we talked about this a little bit in Sunday school this morning. When Barry travels, he likes to know where he's going. You will never find me in the car saying, I don't know where I'm going. I have a place I'm going. And like I told everybody, I usually have a route that I've chosen to get there. And I'm going to stick to the route unless they put construction in my way and force me to turn. I know where I'm going. And you do understand that depending on who's on the throne, and depending on how you chose to be judged, there's a destination that goes with each choice. You see, in Revelation chapter 20, verses 14 and 15, it says, Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. And the lake of fire is the second death. If anyone whose name was not found written in the book of life, notice that. If your name wasn't in the second book, what you did in the first book was irrelevant because it all ends in the same place. He was thrown into the lake of fire. Two destinations. We have terms that we give them. These are ideas about heaven and hell. Now, I'm not really what you call a hellfire and brimstone kind of preacher. It's just not my style. As a matter of fact, this sermon and next week's sermon are about the only two I have on the topic because it says all that you need to know about it. But you do need to understand, you are an eternal being. Someday this suit that we wear, that we walk around on this planet, this thing is going to die or it's going to give out, and it's not. But that's not your end. You're an eternal being. And so by being an eternal being, that means you got to have somewhere to spend eternity. And just like you have a choice of who's on the throne, the judge or the king, just like you have a choice of how you're going to be judged on that day, whether it's going to be deeds or grace, the Bible says you have a choice in your destination. But the choice is now. And the choice is literally a heaven and a hell choice. And you know what? The best person to talk about this was Jesus. You see, in Matthew chapter 13, verses, it should say 24 to 30, Jesus tells a little parable. He tells about a parable about wheats and tares, which is wheats and weeds, basically. We all know what weeds are. We're dealing with them right now. But as the parable goes, a farmer plants a crop, wheat, puts it out there, and then growing along beside it are also planted some weeds. And the workers see both the wheat and the weeds, and they come to the farmer and they say, you want us to pull the weeds up? And the farmer says, no. No, I don't want you to pull the weeds up, because if you pull the weeds up, you might actually damage the roots of the wheat. So let's just let the weeds grow right next to the wheat. So you realize what that means, right? That means as they're growing in the field, the wheat and the weeds both get the same rain. The wheat and the weeds both get the same sunshine. The wheat and the weeds get the same care. If they put fertilizer on the ground, both the wheat and the weeds get the fertilizer. The weeds get all the benefit of the weeds. All the way through life, they can live right side by side, and the farmer is perfectly okay with that. But then that day comes. And on that day, it says, that they call it Harvest Day. And now, I'm not a farm boy, but I know what Harvest Day is. That's the day you come and you bring your crop in. And they come through and they bring all the crop in and they put it there. And now the farmer looks at it and he says, now is the time. Weeds and wheat are separated. Weeds and wheat have two totally different destinations. Because the wheat, who does the wheat belong to? That's the farmer. And the farmer says, take my wheat, take my crop, take those things that belong to me and put those into a barn, because that's their eternity. And the weeds, well, he says, take those and throw them into the fire. And the issue isn't that he hates weeds. The issue is that the weeds are not his. You see the point? You see the way this works? You see why your choices decide your forever? Because once you choose who's on the throne and you choose to go with the judge, now you're choosing, I'm going to go with my deeds. So now you're choosing what the Bible says is hell. That's just the way it works. On the other side, you get it. If you choose king, then you choose grace and mercy. Thus, you also choose heaven. There are two totally different paths that right now on this day, because this day is not that day, on this day you have a choice. Which one do you want? You see, this is the essence of life. That we get to make our choice now. But you do understand, your choice eventually becomes forever. And so once we begin to talk about our destination, the question becomes is, what path are you following? In Matthew chapter 7, verses 13 through 14, Jesus tells another parable. Jesus likes stories. That's why I like reading Jesus' teachings, because Jesus talks in languages that boneheads like me can understand. He makes it really, really, really simple. And he does so by taking things that he found in his culture and say, hey, look, let me tell you a story and I'll apply it to something you understand so that you can get it. And so he talks about this idea that there are two paths that you can follow in your life. Your choice. I'm going to give you an option on how you want to get to that day. And, well, the first path is wide. Man, this thing looks like a super highway. It's got lanes going in every direction. You can just keep moving. As a matter of fact, they got the drive-thrus. You don't ever have to get off of this road. You can stay on it. There are no little rules on this road. You can drive as fast as you like. Anything your heart desires will be on this road. It will all be there for you, and you can drive that road as fast as you like. You can enjoy it as much as you want. You can take credit for anything that you want. You can do anything you want. It just doesn't matter. And Jesus says this is a wide path. And what he says is this is the majority of the way people choose to live their life. We want to live our lives wide open. On the road when I'm in control of the car. On the road when I'm choosing the destination. On the road when I'm choosing when to get off and when to go. On the road when I choose to eat. On the road that I choose what I want. On the road when I am in total control. And Jesus says, you know what? That road is wide. And just so you know, that road leads to that day. That road you're traveling, I don't care how fast you're driving it. I don't care what you're doing on it. I don't care what you're thinking. I know where that road ends because Jesus tells us that road ends at the throne. And you can travel that road if you like. But you do understand that road also leads you down to the part that you've made a choice. You've made a choice. The person on the throne is the judge. I'll then sort it out when I get to the end. Yeah, I know I might have a few speeding tickets. There may be a little fine to pay. But you know, I'll just schmooze it over with him and I'll give him a good story and it'll all be okay. We'll decide it all when I get there at the end. And then once you choose to judge, you realize you've chosen your deeds. And once you choose your deeds, you've chosen your destination. And so on down it goes. Because that's the wide path, folks. But here's the good news. I told you. This was a choice. So this isn't the only choice Jesus gave you. He also says there's another little thing, and it's called the narrow path. And this thing doesn't look like a super highway. Matter of fact, it probably looks more like a trail. One of those things that unless you know where it is, you don't really know how to find it. You ever gone hiking? I don't hike either, but you stumble across a trail and you just kind of follow it, and there it goes. And so it's a trail. And I just want to let you know this trail isn't always easy to find. As a matter of fact, unless you know somebody that's already been there, you probably never find this trail. You don't. And just so you know, it's not an easy trail. As a matter of fact, it goes up and down. It has its twists and its turns. And it can be complicated at times. And sometimes it can be very frustrating. And sometimes you just don't know why you don't just get off of it and get the car and drive on the fast road. But let me offer you a little encouragement about this trail. You won't walk it alone. See, on this trail, everybody's not moving at a pace where they're just consumed with getting where they're going. They walk together, side by side, hand in hand, arm in arm, encouraging each other to take one more step, to do one more motion, to go on and on and on. As a matter of fact, the lights on this path, unlike the highway that's lit with the great big street lights to make it easy for you to find this path, the only light that you're going to see are the lanterns of the people walking on the path. Because it's narrow. It's small. It takes some effort to get on the path. And as you're walking down the path, you're not going to find it paved like the superhighway. As a matter of fact, as you walk down it, maybe the only thing you'll begin to notice is the drops of blood that are scattered along the path as you walk. And then you realize those are the drops of blood shed by the first person to walk this path. His name is Jesus. And just so you know, that path leads to the same place as that highway. Eventually, that path ends up at that day. But you see the difference in how you got there. Because you got there by choosing the person on the throne as your king. And then because he's your king, you understand that there's nothing in your life that you can do that's good enough to make you right. So you understand the concept of grace and mercy. And so you put yourself on the grace and mercy of the king. And so that is how you choose to be judged. And when you put yourself in the grace and mercy of the king, then you understand that judgment leads to your destination. See, this isn't all that confusing. The idea here that we are looking at some great big mystery. No, John's making it pretty clear here. Your life is destined for that day. There isn't a soul that's ever lived on this planet or will ever live on this planet that will not participate in that day. It's given. Just as much as history is, it's a given. You just have to make a decision of how you want to get there. And that's the essence of living in His presence. Back in Jesus' story, do you remember? There were many people that thought they had taken the narrow path, only to figure out they were on the wide path. As a matter of fact, they even said, Jesus, Jesus, what are you talking about that you don't know me? Man, I taught Sunday school for you. Jesus, Jesus, what do you mean you don't know me? Do you know how long my name has been on the books of the church? Jesus looks at him and said, well, that's nice. But you put your faith in the books of the church and not the Lamb's book of life. You tried to impress God with your deeds and not throw yourself on God's grace. And so that's the reason this day has so much emotion, because at this day, everything will be 100% honest. All of the subterfuge and all the things that we do to try to disguise our lives and make us look good, that's all going to be stripped away, and we're going to be standing before that throne with nothing but our lives. So you have to decide how you want to get there for that day. Your choice. You can get there fast, kind of methodically. You can choose wide or narrow. You can choose heaven or hell. You can choose grace or deeds. You can choose judge or king. Your choice. I can't make it for you. Trust me, if I could, I'd sign you all into the Lamb's Book of Life right now. I would. I'd go and get my pen, and I'd go up and say, look, I'm here, and look, your name, yeah, but they're a nice person. We'll put them. I would pen everybody in. But you understand, I'm not the one writing in the book. That book is being kept by one person. His name is Jesus. And so He wants to know, how are you going to get to that day? What do you decide to do? We're going to do a time of decision, and I realize this is a heavy sermon. Man, this is a hard sermon. But you do get it. This is the essence of living in His presence. See, somehow we've got it locked in our head and in our brain that, you know what, just like all dogs go to heaven, you know, when we get to heaven, when we all get to heaven, when the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. we get the idea that when we get there that it's just going to be a pass. And I think Jesus inspires John to put these verses in the book of Revelation because you understand that day is coming. And you have to decide today. Why has it got to be today? Because you're not guaranteed it tomorrow. That day, we don't know when that day is going to come. That's the point of that day. If I knew what that day was going to be, you know what I would do? I would live my life on the wide road all the way up until a few hours before that day, and then I'd look for the exit ramp and jump over onto the narrow road, and then say, see, I'm here. That's the essence of not knowing that day. Because now I have to pick today, wide or narrow. And so in our time of decision, this is a straight up choose. Pick. But know that it's a conscious choice. You can't say, well, I'll do the wide for a little while, and then I'll do the narrow for a little while, and then you know what, I'll go do the wide for a little while. It's a choice. It's a life-altering choice. But it's a choice that will decide your forever.